So, we continue here by starting Those Extraordinary Twins by Mark Twain. A man who is born with the novel writing gift has a troublesome time of it when he tries to build a novel. I know this from experience. He has no idea of his story. In fact, he has no story. He merely has some people in his mind and an incident or two, and also a locality. He knows these people. He knows the selected locality. And he trusts he can plunge those people into those incidents with interesting results. So he goes to work to write a novel. And this, of course, starts Those Extraordinary Twins and Other Stories section. No, that's a thought which comes later. In the beginning, he's only proposing to tell a little tale, a very little tale, a 6-page tale. But as it is a tale which he is not acquainted with, and can only find out what it is by listening as it goes along telling itself, it is more apt to go on and on and on till it spreads itself into a book. I know about this because it has happened to me so many times, and I have noticed another thing, that as the short tale grows into a long tale, the original intention or motive is apt to get abolished and find itself superseded by a quite different one. It was so in the case of a magazine sketch, which I once started to write, a funny and fantastic sketch about a prince and a pauper. It presently assumed a grave cast of its own accord, and, in the new shape, spread itself out into a book. Much the same thing happened with Pudd'nhead Wilson. I had sufficiently a hard time with that tale, because it changed itself from a farce to a tragedy while I was going along with it, a most embarrassing circumstance. But what was a great deal worse was that it was not one story but 2 stories tangled together, and they obstructed and interrupted each other at every turn and created no end of confusion and annoyance. I could not offer the book for publication, for I was afraid it would unseat the reader's reason. I did not know what was the matter with it, for I had not noticed as yet that it was 2 stories in one. It took me months to make that discovery. I carried the manuscript back and forth across the Atlantic 2 or 3 times, and read it and studied it over on shipboard. And at last I saw where the difficulty lay. I had no further trouble. I pulled one of the stories out by the roots, and left the other one a kind of literary Caesarean operation. Would the reader care to know something about the story which I pulled out? He has been told many a time how the born and trained novelist works. Won't he let me round and complete his knowledge by telling him how the jackleg does it? Originally the story was called Those Extraordinary Twins. I meant to make it very short. I had seen a picture of a youthful Italian freak or freaks which was, or which were, an exhibition in our cities, a combination consisting of 2 heads and 4 arms, joined to a single body and a single pair of legs, and I thought I would write an extravagantly fantastic little story with this freak of nature for our heroes. A silly young mess for heroine, and 2 old ladies and 2 boys for minor parts. I lavishly elaborated these people and their doings, of course, but the tale kept spreading along, and other people got to intruding themselves and taking up more and more room with their talk and their affairs. Among them came a stranger named Pudd'nhead Wilson and a woman named Roxana, and presently the doings of these 2 pushed up into prominence a young fellow named Tom Driscoll, whose proper place was away in the obscure background. Before the book was half finished, those 3 were taking things almost entirely into their own hands. Oh, there's some weird nut growing out here. and working the whole tale as a private venture of their own, a tale which they had nothing at all to do with by rights. When the book was finished, and I came to look around to see what had become of the team, I had originally started out with Aunt Patsy Cooper, Aunt Patsy Hale, the two boys, and Rowena, the lightweight heroine. They were nowhere to be seen and had disappeared from the story some time or other. I hunted about and found them stranded, idle, forgotten, and permanently useless. It was very awkward. It was awkward all around, but more particularly in the case of Rowena, because there was a love match on between her and one of the twins that constituted the freak, and I had worked it up into a blistering heat and thrown in a quite dramatic love quarrel, where Rowena scathingly denounced her betrothed for getting drunk, and scoffed at his explanation of how it had happened, and wouldn't listen to it, and had driven him from her in the usual forever way. Now here she sat crying and broken-hearted, for she had found out that he had spoken only the truth, that it was not he, but the other half of the freak, that had drunk the liquor and made him drunk, that her half was a prohibitionist and had never drunk a drop in his life, and although tight as a brick 3 days in the week, was wholly innocent of blame, and, indeed, when sober, was constantly doing all he could to reform his brother, the other half, who never got any satisfaction out of drinking anyway, because liquor never affected him. Yes, here she was, stranded with that deep injustice of hers, torturing her poor torn heart. I didn't know what to do with her. I was as sorry for her as anybody could be, but the campaign was over, the book was finished, she was sidetracked, and there was no possible way of crowding her in anywhere. I could not leave her there, of course. It would not do so. After spreading her out so, and making such a to-do over her affairs, it would be absolutely necessary to account to the reader for her. I thought, and studied, but I arrived at nothing. I finally saw plainly that there was really no way but one. I must simply give her the grand bounce. It grieved me to do it, for after associating with her so much as I had come to kind of like her after a fashion, notwithstanding she was such a donkey, and said such stupid, irritating things, and was so nauseatingly sentimental. Still, it had to be done. So, at the top of chapter 17, I put a calendar remark concerning July 4th, and began the chapter with this statistic. Rowena went out in the backyard after supper to see the fireworks, and fell down the well, and got drowned. It seemed abrupt, but I thought maybe the reader wouldn't notice it, because I changed the subject right away to something else. Anyway, it loosened up Rowena from where she was stuck, and got her out of the way. That was the main thing. It seemed a prompt good way of weeding out people that had got stalled, and plenty a good way for those others. So I hunted up the boys and said they went out back one night to stone the cat, and fell down the well and got drowned. Well, yeah, sometimes when you try to do something wrong, it works out even worse for you, right? Than the wrong that you intended. But I was going to drown some of the others, but I gave up the idea partly because I believed that if I kept that up, it would arouse attention and perhaps sympathy with those people, and partly because it was not a large well and would not hold any more anyway. Still, the story was unsatisfactory. Here was a set of new characters who were become inordinately prominent, and who persisted in remaining so to the end. And back yonder was an older set who made a large noise and a great to-do for a little while, and then suddenly played out utterly and fell down the well. There was a radical defect somewhere, and I must search it out and cure it. The defect turned out to be the one already spoken of, 2 stories in one, a farce and a tragedy. So I pulled out the farce and left the tragedy. This left the original team in, but only as mere names, not as characters. Their prominence was wholly gone. They were not even worth drowning, so I removed that detail. Also, I took those twins apart and made two separate men of them. They had no occasion to have foreign names now, but it was too much trouble to remove them all through, so I left them christened as they were and made no explanation. Chapter 1, The Twins as They Really Were. Now, if you want a story, Don Quixote is like the number of characters in that book. Isn't there like 700 or something? Maybe there's a translation of Don Quixote that I can share for... I'm not sure if it's the type of book that I put on this channel, though. The Twins as They Really Were. The conglomerate twins were brought on the stage in Chapter 1 of the original extravaganza. Aunt Patsy Cooper has received their letter applying for board and lodging, and Rowena, her daughter, insane with joy, is begging for a hearing of it. Well, sit down then and be quiet a minute, and don't fly around. It fairly makes me tired to see you. It starts off so. Honored Madame. I like that, Ma, don't you? It shows they're high-bred. Yes, I noticed that when I first read it. My brother and I have seen your advertisement by chance in a copy of your local journal. It's so beautiful and smooth, Ma. Don't you think so? Yes. Seems so to me. And beg leave to take the room you offer. We are 24 years of age and twins. Twins, how sweet. I do hope they are handsome, and I just know they are. Don't you hope they are, Ma? Land, I ain't particular. We are Italians by birth. It's so romantic. Just think, there's never been one in this town, and everybody will want to see them, and they're all ours. Think of that. But have lived long in the various countries of Europe and several years in the United States. Oh, think what wonders they've seen, Ma. Won't it be good to hear them talk? I reckon so. Yes, I reckon so. Our names are Luigi and Angelo Capello. Beautiful. Perfectly beautiful. Not like Jones and Robinson and those horrible names. You desire but one guest. But, dear Madame, if you will allow us to pay for two, we will not discommode you. We will sleep together in the same bed. We've always been used to this and prefer it. And then he goes on to say they will be down Thursday. And this is Tuesday. I don't know how I'm ever going to wait, Ma. The time does drag on, and I'm so dying to see them. Which of them do you reckon is the tallest, Ma? How do you suppose I can tell, child? Most of they are the same size. Twins are. Well, then, which do you reckon is the best looking? Goodness knows I don't. I think Angelo is. It's the prettiest name anyways. Don't you think it's a sweet name, Mom? Yes, it's well enough. I'd like both of them better if I knew the way to pronounce them. The Italian way. I mean, the Missouri way and the Italian way is different, I judge. Maybe, yes. It's Luigi that writes the letter. What do you reckon is the reason Angelo didn't write it? Well, how can I tell? What's the difference who writes it? So long as it's done. Oh, I hope it wasn't because he is sick. You don't think he is sick, do you, Ma? Sick your granny? What's to make him sick? Oh, there's never any telling. These foreigners with that kind of names are so delicate, and of course, that kind of names are not suited for a climate. You wouldn't expect it. Well, people are exposed to different things in different areas, but, and so on, no end. The time drags along. Thursday comes. The boat arrives in a pouring storm toward midnight. At last, there was a knock at the door, and the anxious family jumped to open it. 2 Negro men entered, each carrying a trunk, and proceeded upstairs toward the guest room. They followed a stupefying apparition, a double-headed human creature with 4 arms, 1 body, and a single pair of legs. It, are they, as you please, bowed with elaborate foreign formality, but the Coopers could not respond immediately. They were paralyzed. At this moment, there came from the rear of the group a fervent ejaculation, "Milan!" followed by a crash of crockery. and the slave wench Nancy stood petrified and staring, with a tray of wrecked things at her feet. The incident broke the spell and brought the family to consciousness. The beautiful heads of the newcomer bowed again, and one of them said with easy grace and dignity, "I crave the honor, Madame and Miss, to introduce you to my brother, Count Luigi Capello," and the other had bowed, and myself, Count Angelo, and at the same time offer sincere apologies for the lateness of our coming, which was unavoidable, and both heads bowed again. The poor old lady was in a whirl of amazement and confusion, but she managed to stammer out, I'm glad to make your acquaintance, gentlemen. As for the delay, it is nothing, don't mention it. This is my daughter, Rowena, sir, gentlemen. Please step into the parlor and sit down, and have a bite and sup. You were dreadful wet, and must be uncomfortable, both of you, But to the old lady's relief, and they courteously excused themselves, saying it would be wrong to keep the family out of their beds longer. Then each head bowed in turn and uttered a friendly good night, and the singular figure moved away in the wake of Rowena's small brothers, who bore candles and disappeared up the stairs. The widow tottered into the parlor and sank into the chair with a gasp, and Rowena followed, tongue-tied and dazed. The two sat silent in the throbbing summer heat, unconscious of the million-voiced music of the mosquitoes, unconscious of the roaring gale, the lashing and thrashing of the rain along the windows and the roof, the white glare of the lightning, the tumultuous booming and billowing thunder of the thunder, conscious of nothing but that prodigy, that uncanny apparition that had come and gone so suddenly, that weird strange thing that was so soft-spoken and so gentle a manner, and yet had shaken them like an earthquake with the shock of its gruesome aspect. At last a cold little shudder quivered along the widow's meager frame, and said, in a weak voice, it was awful, just the mere look of that Philippine. Rowena did not answer. Her faculties were still caked. She had not yet found her voice. Presently the widow said, a little resentfully, "Always been used to sleeping together, in fact, prefer it. And I was thinking it was to accommodate me. I thought it was very good of them. Whereas a person situated as that young man is, Ma, you oughtn't to begin by getting up a prejudice against him. I'm sure he is good-hearted and means well. Both of his faces show it." "I'm not so certain about that. The one on the left, the one on its left hasn't near as good of a face, in my opinion, as its brother." "That's Luigi." "Yes, Luigi. Anyways, it's the dark-skinned one, the one that was west of his brother when they stood at the door, up to all kinds of mischief and disobedience when he was a boy, I'll be bound. His mother had trouble to lay her hand on him when she wanted him. But the one on the right is as good as gold. I can see that. That's Angelo." "Yes, Angelo. I reckon, though I can't tell the other from which by their names yet a while. But it's the right-hand one, the blonde one." How do you give birth to a blonde and a dark Siamese twin? He has such kind blue eyes and curly copper hair and fresh complexion, and such a noble face. And oh, it is a noble face, Ma, just royal, you may say, and beautiful, dearie me, how beautiful. But both are that. The dark one as beautiful as a picture. There's no such wonderful faces and handsome heads in this town, none that can even begin, and such hands, especially Angelo's, so shapely and stuff. How could you tell which one they belonged to? They had gloves on. Why, didn't I see them take off their hats? That don't signify. They might have taken off each other's hats. Nobody could tell. There was just a wormy squirming of arms in the air. Seemed to be a couple dozen of them all riding at once, and it just made me dizzy to see them go. Why, Ma, I hadn't any difficulty. There's 2 arms on each shoulder. There now, 1 arm on each shoulder belongs to each one of the creatures, don't it? For a person to have 2 arms on one shoulder wouldn't do him any good, would it? Of course not. Each has an arm on each shoulder. Now then, you tell me which of them belongs to which, if you can. They don't know themselves. They just work whichever arm comes handy. Of course they do, especially if they are in a hurry and can't stop to think which belongs to which. The mother seemed to have the rights of the argument, so the daughter abandoned the struggle. Presently, the window rose with a yawn and said, "Poor thing, I hope it won't catch cold. It was powerfully wet, just drenched, you may say. I hope it has left its boots outside so they can be dried." Then she gave a little start and looked perplexed. Now I remember I heard one of them ask Joe to call him at half after 7. I think it was the one on the left. No, it was the one on the east of the other one, but I didn't hear the other one saying anything. I wonder if he wants to be called too. Do you reckon it's too late to ask? Why, Ma, it's not necessary. Calling one is calling both. If one gets up, the other's got to go. Sure, of course. I never thought about that. Well, come along. Maybe we can get some sleep. But I don't know. I'm so shook up with what we've been through. The stranger had made an impression on the boys, too. They had a word of talk as they were getting to bed. Henry, the gentle, the humane, said, "I feel ever so sorry for it, don't you, Joe?" But Joe was a boy of this world, active, enterprising, and had a theatrical side to him. Sorry? Why? How you talk. It can't stir a step without attracting attention. It's just grand, Henry said reproachfully. Instead of pitying it, Joe, you talk as if what? I know one thing mighty certain. If you can fix me so I can eat for two and only have to stub toes for one, I ain't going to fool away no such chance just for sentiment. The twins were wet and tired, and they proceeded to undress without any preliminary remarks. The abundance of sleeve made the partnership coat hard to get off, for it was like a skinning of a tarantula. What, can you eat a tarantula if you do that? But if it came at last, after much tugging and perspiring, look that up before you try such a thing. The mutual vest followed. Then the brothers stood up before the glass, and each took off his own cravat and collar. The collars were of the standing kind and came high up under the ears, like the sides of a wheelbarrow, as required by the fashion of the day. The cravats were as broad as a bank bill, with fringed ends which stood far out to the right and left, like the wings of dragonfly, and this also was strictly in accordance with the fashion of the time. Each cravat, as to color, was in perfect taste so far as its owner's complexion was concerned. A delicate pink, in case of the blonde brother, a violent scarlet, in the case of the brunette. But as the combination they broke all the laws of taste known to civilization, nothing more fiendish and irreconcilable than those shrieking and blaspheming colors could have been contrived. The wet boots gave no end of trouble to Luigi. When they were off at last, Angelo said with bitterness, "I wish you wouldn't wear such tight boots. They hurt my feet." Luigi answered with indifference, "My friend, when I'm in command of our body, I choose my apparel according to my own convenience, as I have remarked more than several times already. When you are in command, I beg you will do as you please." Angelo was hurt, and the tears came into his eyes. There was gentle reproach in his voice, but not anger, when he replied, "Luigi, I often consult your wishes, but you never consult mine. When I am in command, I treat you as a guest. I try to make you feel at home. When you are in command, you treat me as an intruder. You make me feel unwelcome. It embarrasses me cruelly in company, for I can see that people notice it and comment on it." "Oh, damn the people," responded the brother languidly. Careful how you curse people, right? And with the air of one who is tired of the subject. A slight shudder shook the frame of Angelo, but he said nothing, and the conversation ceased. Each buttoned his own share of the nightshirt in silence. Then Luigi, with Paine's Age of Reason, that's my programs on the Georgia Guidestones and writings have referred to that because that was one of the things that went into their reasoning for putting the thing together. But Paine's Age of Reason in his hand, sat down in one chair and put his feet in another and lit his pipe, while Angelo took his whole duty of man and both began to read. Angelo presently began to cough. His coughing increased and became mixed with gaspings for breath, and he was finally obliged to make an appeal to his brother's humanity. Luigi, if you would only smoke a little milder tobacco, I'm sure I could learn not to mind it in time. But this is so strong and the pipe is so rank that... Angelo, I wouldn't be such a baby. I've learned to smoke in a week, and the trouble is already over with me. If you would try, you could learn too, and then you would stop spoiling my comfort with your everlasting complaints. Ah, brother, that's a strong word, everlasting, and isn't quite fair. I only complain when I suffocate. You know I don't complain when we are in the open air. Well, anyway, you could learn to smoke yourself. But my principles, Luigi, you forget my principles. You would not have me do a thing which I regard as a sin. Oh, bosh. The conversation ceased again, for Angelo was sick and discouraged and strangling. But after some time he closed his book and asked Luigi to sing from Greenland's icy mountains with him. But he would not. And when he tried to sing by himself, Luigi did his best to drown his plaintive tenor with a rude and rollicking song delivered in a thundering bass. After the singing there was silence, and neither brother was happy. Before blowing the light out, Luigi swallowed half a tumbler of whiskey, and Angelo, whose sensitive organization could not endure intoxicants of any kind, took a pill to keep it from giving him the headache. Chapter 2. Ma Cooper gets all mixed up. The family sat in the breakfast room, waiting for the twins to come down. The window was quiet. The daughter was alive with happy excitement. She said, "Aw, they're a boon, Ma, just a boon. Don't you think so?" "Laws, I hope so." "I don't know." "Why, Ma, yes you do. They're so fine and handsome and high-bred and polite, so every way superior to our gawks here in the village. Why, they'll make life different from what it was, so humdrum and commonplace, you know. Oh, you may be sure they're full of accomplishments and knowledge of the world, and all that. That will be an immense advantage to society here. Don't you think so, Ma?" "Mercy on me, how should I know? I've hardly set eyes on them yet." After a pause, she added, "They made considerable noise after they went up." "Noise? Why, Ma, they were singing, and it was beautiful, too." "Oh, it was well enough, but too mixed up, seemed to me." "Now, Ma, honor bright, did you ever hear Greenland's icy mountains sung sweeter? Now, did you? If it had been sung by itself, it would have been uncommonly sweet. I don't deny it. But what they wanted to mix it up with old Bob Ridley for, I can't make it out. Why, they don't go together at all. They're not of the same nature. Bob Ridley is a common rackety, slam-bang secular song, one of the rippingest and rentingest and noisiest there is. I'm no judge of music, and I don't claim it, but in my opinion, nobody can make those two songs go together right. Why, Ma, I thought, it don't make any difference what you thought. It can't be done." Well, nowadays there's a lot of this mashup business stuff going on. "They tried it, and to my mind it was a failure. I never heard such a crazy uproar. It seemed to me, sometimes, the roof would come off, and as for the cats, well, I've lived many a year, and I've seen cats aggravated in more ways than one, but I've never seen cats take on the way they took on last night. Well, I don't think that goes for anything, Ma, because it is the nature of cats that any sound that is unusual... Unusual? You may well call it so now if they are going to sing duets every night. I do hope they will sing the same tune at the same time, for in my opinion a duet that is made up of two different tunes is a mistake, especially when the tunes ain't any kin to one another that way. But, Ma, I think it must be a foreign custom, and it must be right, too, and that the best way, because they have had every opportunity to know what is right, and it don't stand to reason that with their education they would do anything but what the highest musical authorities have sanctioned." Well, hopefully not, but hopefully they're not, people aren't conservative to that point. I mean, people are, but you know what I mean. "You can't help But admit that, Ma. The argument was formidably strong. The old lady could not find any way around it. So, after thinking it over a while, she gave in with a sigh of discontent and admitted that the daughter's position was probably correct. Being vanquished, she had no mind to continue the topic at that disadvantage, and was about to seek a change when a change came of itself. A footstep was heard on the stairs, and she said, "There, he's coming. They, Ma, you ought to say they, is nearer, right." The new lodger, rather shoutingly dressed, but looking superbly handsome, stepped with courtly carriage into the trim little breakfast room and put out all his cordial arms at once, like one of those pocket knives with a multiplicity of blades, and shook hands with the whole family simultaneously. He was so easy and pleasant and hearty that all embarrassment presently thawed away and disappeared, and a cheery feeling of friendliness and comradeship took its place. He, or preferably they, were asked to occupy the seat of honor at the foot of the table. They consented with thanks, and carved the beefsteak with one set of their hands, while they distributed it at the same time with the other set. "Will you have coffee, gentlemen, or tea?" "Coffee for Luigi, if you please, madame. Tea for me." "Cream and sugar?" "For me, yes, madame. Luigi takes his coffee black. Our natures differ a good deal from each other, and our tastes also." The first time the Negro girl, Nancy, appeared in the door and saw the two heads turned in opposite directions and both talking at once, then saw the commingling arms feed potatoes into one mouth and coffee into the other at the same time, she had to pause and pull herself out of a faintness that came over her. But after that she held her grip and was able to wait on the table with fair courage. Conversation fell naturally into the customary grooves, and it was a little jerky at first, because none of the family could get so smoothly through a sentence without a wobble in it, here and a break there, caused by some new surprise in a way of attitude or gesture on part of the twins. Now, yeah, you gotta sometimes practice your reactions, or something is going to surprise you, and people are going to be rude and offended and whatnot. But I mean, life isn't about whether you offend people or not, but you know what I mean.